Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm your venerable host Orochi, and today we are going to talk about Kingmaker, Adventure Path for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is sort of a remake, remaster, retry, second attempt at this whole idea because Kingmaker was a very popular first edition module, or adventure path, if you will. And so, by popular demand, they brought it back. And it's interesting. I never played the first one because I didn't play Pathfinder 1 at all. But it's interesting to note that this seems to take a lot of the same ideas and not just translate them to second edition and make them work, but it improves upon them, which you would kind of hope for. But, you look at a lot of 5e stuff and... But it also progresses the timeline in that it suggests... This is just the player's guide. Only the backers and stuff have it so far. It'll be out for sale within the next couple of weeks. So if this is your kind of thing, that's when you can pick it up. But they also added some new hooks and stuff to the adventure. This book makes it sound like this is... You get started off in a country that's trying to take back land from this no man's land that is between multiple kingdoms or whatever. That seems to be the basis for the story. I haven't played the first edition, nor have I played the video game by Owlcat. So I have almost no knowledge of the original Kingmaker. But you are apparently sent forth by a kingdom to take over land in such a way that you're not their strict representative, so it's not like an act of war or aggression or anything. You're independent contractors going out and making stable residence and just seeing if it'll work. And this seems to be like the second attempt by this country to do so, and hopefully within the core book it'll tell you what happened to all the first adventure group that went out like 10 plus years ago, and maybe that could have a lot of hooks in with what happened before, and that would be kind of cool. But the whole premise of this is that you're going out and you're starting your own kingdom. You're going to go out as an adventuring group, select a plot of land, and just start building. So it's basically adding a touch of Civilization, the video game, to your TTRPG. Which, if that's your thing, it might be really, really cool. But this is probably not an adventure for everyone. It's going to be a lot of people who don't want to micromanage some building bullshit and political bullshit and all that kind of stuff. But I will hopefully be in a game that'll start this next month or maybe in December, and I will perhaps make videos on how that campaign's going, because the idea of this intrigues me a lot. It sounds super cool. Especially since I've only slightly looked into the stuff that Matthew Colville has done, which is basically the same sort of stuff as this, because he has Kingdoms and Warfare, which is his second book in the series, I think, where he made kingdom building rules and army rules, and you have both of those in this book. So it's cool to see different people's take on, like, something that really brings everything back to the core of the genre, because D&D started as Chainmail, which was just a tabletop war game, and then people were just like, well, what if we just want to adventure as the heroes of this? And that's where D&D basically popped up from. This, of course, because it's a player's guide, it has the suggestions of what to play as, and these are most, I have learned through dealings on the forums and stuff, that these are not suggestions on what is thematic, but these are suggestions of within the printed book there is references to these things and story tie-ins to these options that are strongly recommended and recommended. So strongly recommended stuff, you will have either bonuses or additional story hooks and maybe even adventure stuff or whatever for choosing these options, which is sort of weird to look at it that way, because most of the time when I looked at these without knowing that, I thought, oh, these are the things that most thematically fit into the themes that you're trying to go within this story. And to some degree that's true, but also like appropriate is these things. But I've also known from reading through this thing that there are kobold and lizard folk clans within these lands that you may or may not run into, because you could probably avoid them if you wanted to, but you would have opportunities to roleplay there and do stuff with them. So some of this is kind of weird in the way that they put these things, because that explains why the Outlaws of Alkenstar player's guide was really wonky. Because it's like, oh, magic sometimes maybe doesn't work, but then they put the medicine skill as it's kind of appropriate but not great. It's like, how could you not strongly recommend something when you're telling your players not to bring magical healing? So you knowing that really changes how you look at these options quite a bit. But that's all the stuff that's good to bring, good to use. Just basically everything. Like, all the basic stuff and everything. Yeah. Then you've got all the normal stuff. Here you got your unique backgrounds, which the unique backgrounds for every AP basically give you a nice little bit of theme so that you know where you need to point your character when you start off, to try and include at least something of this theme in your backstory. That'll help you get into the adventure more, instead of just, hey, you're in this group and you're adventuring, go. But it's all like living in or around Brevia. I don't really know the map all that well. It is southeast of Sakot, Mendev, and all the stuff that takes place in Wrath of the Righteous, because I have played that, so I know a little bit of that map. And this is quite a bit farther, not terribly too far, but southeast of that, which is interesting to, I find geological stuff interesting to know the maps. But this is all living in or around that area, so you have reason for why a noble would summon you and put you on the start of this quest. So this one probably, maybe or maybe not so much more than other things, is like, hey, this is the starting point you need to reach with your backstory. Because this big thing is going to happen to you. But here's the interesting thing. The kingdom that you build is, because Pathfinder 2 is very modular, the kingdom that you build is basically another character. It's got its own character sheet that looks pretty much exactly like a normal character sheet. They just change the words of things because it has ability scores, and those are culture, economy, loyalty, and stability instead of strength, dexterity, and intelligence. And it also has its own skills, and as it levels up, you can choose feats. And like, a lot of that is super cool, but this right here is going to be the big issue, is that everybody needs to be all in on this idea. because it's going to take up a lot of your time, because unlike a lot of the other adventures where Age of Ashes had this shoehorned into it really roughly, where it's like you do these adventures and then you have months of downtime. And it's like, why the fuck would I be sitting around for months not doing anything? I'm an adventurer. I should be out adventuring, right? And so that's what you do. And your downtime, you're running your kingdom. So that's super cool, but that's also like you're doing things in your downtime. You're making rolls, you're making decisions, you're actually doing things in your downtime. It's like a separate adventure between your going out as a party adventures. You're also, as your party, deciding, what things are most important to build within your kingdom and what sort of where you want to spread, like what your future things are going to be, like where you want to build next. Do you want to try and build over this way through the forest, or go to a river, or over towards the mountain, or whatever? You can plan out a lot of different things, and there's also going to be problems that prop up, because like a 4X adventure game, this has, you make rolls, then random things can happen to you. And that is super cool that you've got like this 4X splash in your TTRPG. But some of the things are there's only one slot to do this thing, and so everyone has to agree. Like when you choose feats, when your kingdom levels up and it gains a feat, you get one feat. So everybody needs to agree on like what the best feat for your kingdom is. That's a bit of a problem, whereas in a lot of other ways you don't have that problem, because everybody can choose to have a different role, which I think is super fantastic. This is like basically choosing your background of your kingdom. And then you get to choose where you want to start, and it gives you, different boosts. And then you choose what kind of government you want. I think this is kind of weird. Like the way that they describe these is super strange. Like despotism is you have a monarchy. Like, are all monarchs despots? It's like, I don't think you really want to tie those two terms together like that. That seems really weird. But whatever. And that's all the stuff for making your kingdom. And then you choose leaders. And I think this is a really cool part in this, because there are, 8 or 10? Yeah, 8. There's 8 leadership roles to fill in your kingdom. And it's funny that this, although if the party has more than 8 PCs, it's like, if you're running a fucking group that has more than 8 PCs, you might have other problems than trying to have people stuff to do in the kingdom. Like, you're going to have problems just doing things, period. But it's cool because in a standard 4-person party, that means you need to find 4 other characters, 4 NPCs that you need to build trust with, so that you can put them in positions of power within your kingdom. And that is such a fantastic place for a GM to really shine and build. Like, you can either make your own characters, or this book, I believe, has like 20 or 40 or a ridiculous amount of pages dedicated just to NPCs and stuff. Like, this book is supposed to be like one of the largest books Paizo has put out yet. Like, bigger than the core rule book, bigger than, the GM. Well, the TMG wasn't that big, but bigger than Secrets of Magic and the core rule book, like the biggest book. And it's because there's so many things that they wanted to really support and really flesh out, and having 40 to 60 pages or whatever of NPCs that you can use as either just introduce them to your group or, modify them however you want, or use them as just inspiration to make your own characters. There's so much cool room to have dozens and dozens of noteworthy NPCs in this AP, so that, just either for political stuff or just be like, hey, my friend Bob over here is a really reliable guy. He's always there helping me out doing stuff. Well, let's make him, our chief banker, because I don't want to deal with money. Like, stuff like that. It's just, it's so cool. It's just so much. It's such a big opening that really encourages GMs to really flesh out and role play super cool, interesting NPCs. And I don't think that there's any of the APs that have come out so far. Maybe the Mwangi School one, Strength Thousands. That probably was the most heavy RP AP that's come out so far. And this will match that or exceed that, I think, because it's just giving such a great space for characters to interact with cool NPCs. And hopefully a lot of groups will be able to take advantage of that. Sadly, my group probably won't be doing that so much, which I think will suck, because we're far more most of the other players are far more focused on the mechanical stuff and less on role playing, which is unfortunate. And so it'll be very interesting to see what parts of that they enjoy with this. Because, like, right here, quests pop up with notable NPCs, and you can just attach plot hooks and stuff to notable NPCs that will stick around after, just popping up and asking for help. They might stick around and be useful and stuff. Like, that's so cool. And this is how you're leveling advancements for your kingdom. Gets lots of cool stuff, just like a character, which is awesome. All of this really cool leveling up stuff. And just in-depth rules on leadership roles and what you do in them. And you need to fill them all or else you get negatives. And then a whole bunch of feats. And how you make skill checks. And how you build stuff. And hexploration and hex claiming so that you can build on hexes. And because you're constantly going to be expanding your kingdom, and that's a whole nother area of like 4x coolness that, you need to decide like what areas you want to build on and what things you want to build in those areas. These are still skills. Some people have noted that it's kind of bad that they tied like the first quests for certain things that trigger, like, once you've done this guy pops up. It's like, well, did you need to put that in the player's guide? Like, I don't know. I kind of hope most GMs like change this and just put in a different character if any of their players are look at the player's guide, just because, it's kind of stupid knowing that, oh, once I do this thing, this guy's going to show up. Lots and lots of activities and skills and cool stuff you can do. Like, you might be taking multiple turns as your kingdom doing things, which is super interesting. Especially if you know your group and know what sort of things they enjoy doing. because then you can really play into that a lot. Then you got resource dice, which are like hero points. Right? No, those are what you spend to grow. But you can also get, I forget what they call them. There's specific points that are like hero points, and then you have to keep people happy. And you expand your kingdom. Make diplomacy and trade agreements. Terrain features are going to be big things because you're doing hex building and expanding. Oh, yeah. That's what it is. Right? Yep. Fame and infamy points. So this is what your turn looks like when you're doing your kingdom. Assign leadership roles, which is usually a thing you're going to skip because you shouldn't be messing with it very often. See how much unrest you have. Get your upkeep. And then pay your consumption. And then go through all the fun stuff. And leadership activities when you start actually doing things once you have everything on the table. And then events, random shit that happens to you. And that is super, super interesting. And then you got to make settlements, and you can build. You get a separate grid for each settlement you make, and you have to build stuff in them. And those buildings can be upgraded to different levels, and they all provide different bonuses. So you get different blocks. And it also determines what the max level of items you can get there are. And I really like that. You get structures, so you got to build stuff and fill out all of your towns that you make and level them up. Well, you don't level them up, but you build them up. These are all the things you can build in them. And so, you'll have different towns that are dedicated towards different things. And that's super cool. So much. If you like 4X sort of stuff, this could be crazy fun. And there's a lot of different things you can focus on here. Like, if your group prefers more just RP instead of really getting into the nitty-gritty of how to build stuff, then you can do that. I think my group is probably going to be more focused on, the building and maintaining of different things and the adventuring and, the normal stuff, getting loot and all that. But then also, who do we want to ally with? There's a lot of cool things, and it feels like there's ways to streamline certain things where if your group likes certain aspects of this AP and not others, you can just streamline those things and cut them out. Just do them behind your screen instead of having your players fret over things that they don't really care about. And then we go down into war. And it shows how you move your armies around and what you can do with them. And then army activities, because an army is basically just like another character, just a group of a bunch of soldiers, which is... It's interesting to see how different this is, considering they made the troop rules, which were supposed to be like leading into this, but then they didn't really use that at all. So I'm definitely going to come up with some custom rules for how to use troops as armies in, because I plan on running a very different version of this, my own home brew using these rules at some point. Because the one thing that I don't like about this is that armies do not interact with player characters in any way. When an army is fighting against another army, you do not participate in that battle at all, which I do not like. You should be hero units and skirmishers at the very least. These are the different kinds of units you can have, and I hope that these are all basic armies. So I really hope in the final version they'll have like a ton of different unique stuff. Like if you make friends with some of the kobolds or lizard folks, you can get some of them as a unique army. Or there's another kingdom in here which you can ally with or go to war with, and maybe if you ally with them and get a really good with them, you can build, recruit some of their unique troops and stuff. Because I always love that sort of stuff, having unique troops instead of just basic stuff. So that will be super cool if they make lots of options. And I hope that the rules also say that there'll be other, people building their own kingdoms that you can come up against, either ally or go to war with. Because otherwise, why do you need armies? All these cool things you can put on your armies. You can teach them different tactics because they level up. Look at all those cool things. There we go. Player characters and battles. In a war encounter, the focus is on the clash between opposing armies on the field of battle. These rules don't work particularly well when an army attacks a single target. Such encounters are better played out with PCs facing the threat themselves. But what if the PCs want to fight with their soldiers on the field of battles? For the most part, a PC who fights in an army won't noticeably affect that army's stats. Having a famous or infamous founder of the kingdom fighting at your side in battle can bolster an army's mindset, though. So if you choose, you can get a +1 status bonus to morale. A better way to incorporate PCs in battles is to have them confront specific singular enemies on the field of battle while the armies themselves fight it out all around them. So that's basically like, hey, your party's the leader of your army, and then you get to get into single combat with the group that's leading the enemy army, which can be cool, but come on. Who the fuck doesn't want to pretend you're playing Dynasty Warriors in a TTRPG, right? You want to be able to cleave through dozens and dozens of soldiers. That's fun. So I'm definitely going to come up with my own unique rules for involving troops, and somehow I'll have to crunch a bunch of numbers, but take the hit points and stats and stuff of armies and see how I can extrapolate them into making sense in a way that they can interact with player stats in a meaningful way. Because all the armies have, like, they do 1 damage if they're successful at attacking, and most of them have like 2 to 4 health. Yeah. Infantry, 4 health. Cavalry, 4 health. Skirmishers, 4 health. Siege engines, 6 health. And most of them just do 1 damage when they succeed. And that's really basic. Like, super, super basic. So I'm going to have to find some way to change that, because I think making it so that 4 is rather 400. Like, an infantry group will be some, 30 odd infantrymen. And so if they each have, like standard issue human health, like 6 health or whatever each, then times 30, then you'd be like, oh, you have to be less than 30 because math or whatever to come out to 400. But you round it out so that the total troop is going to have 400 health. And so that's something I'm gonna have to homebrew, because I really think a lot of people would like actually participating in the army, especially since instead of just having your army clashes be like, this army walks up to that army and they fight, like Matt Colville's thing is super, super basic, but it seems like it's a lot more in depth than what they got going on in Pathfinder 2, because he has a battle map that you use, and it's all squares, and you can, choose to move around a little bit, but that's still a lot better than what this seems to be, where it's just armies are in nebulous theater of the mind space and they roll against each other. Whereas I would much rather have it be, you if anybody has played Dynasty Warriors, you can take any of those kind of scenarios and make a war battle out of that, Like, you just take any setting where there's structures, or there doesn't even need to be structures, like a river, a bridge, a forest or whatever, where different troops are split up in different areas and you want to go through them, and the GM is keeping track of where the generals of the enemy army are moving through. And like, that is a super cool, it's far more engaging, I think, than realistic battles where it's like everybody lines up like a bunch of fucking idiots and they shoot arrows at each other and they run at each other and then you just roll some dice and that's the end. Like, realistic battles are like heinously bad. They're just terrible. Whereas if you set up scenarios like Dynasty Warriors sort of scenarios, I think that's far more engaging and gives you a sort of sense of progression where, you can push the enemy back out of these buildings or whatever, or lose ground as the enemy does stuff. And I think that would be far more interesting, take a hell of a lot more time to build out, but it'd be far more interesting for players to engage with scenarios as army battles instead of just stats. But that might just be me. And that'd be another thing where you could just use these if you want to simplify it, or you can go ham and make it super in-depth. Your armies can get beaten and routed. And then it just has hex stuff. So, yep, that's all of Kingmaker, and it's got a lot of 4X vibes to it, and it's nice that you can find ways to just focus your group on the stuff they want to do and kind of just streamline and ignore the stuff that they might not want to. So I think this will have a lot of cool stuff for a lot of different groups, so long as your GM knows how to balance it out right. Which could be a problem because most APs are just hand-holdy, railroady kind of things, where this is like the first AP that really seems like an open-world 4X adventure kind of thing, But I really think this could be super fun, and you could really run this AP multiple times and have completely different experiences with different groups. And that fascinates me. Like, I really hope to get into multiple groups that are running this AP over time, because I would love the different experiences that you can get with it. So that's it for now. Hopefully a lot of people can get into this and enjoy it. Until next time, enjoy.